What's up guys, my name's Liv and welcome to Chasing Flags. Today, we're going to be talking about INDYCAR and INDYNXT at St. Louis. And first we're going to talk about my experience because I actually went to the race in person, and then we'll kind of get into the more race review-esque stuff. So let's talk about my experience going. So this year, it was my second year going to St. Louis at Worldwide Technology Raceway. In Madison, Illinois, which is like 10 minutes from St. Louis, Missouri. It was pretty awesome. I would say it was a lot better than last year just because of the time of year and the time of day. I think INDYCAR and Fox did a great job moving their race to nighttime. I think that was a great call from them because last year we had it was like in the middle of the day. It was still super hot. It was exhausting. By the time the race started, the sun was going down. You had epic sunsets. The weather was nice. Like, it wasn't too bad and it wasn't too cold. It was like just the right temperature, and the vibes were immaculate. And all the people that had to do stuff earlier in the day, go to church, go to work, whatever they had to do, were able to come to the race at night. When I tell you that I felt like for most of the day there was a good amount of people, but that it wasn't full, let me tell you, it filled up. There were people coming in right pretty much the hour before the race was going to start. And that was like a long line. There were thousands of people trying to come in about an hour or two before the race started. And the stands filled up. There were a lot of people that were like, oh, the stands didn't look that full. The reason why they didn't look that full was because there's a section of the track that doesn't have any tickets that they sell for. They keep it empty. That's like their sponsorship stuff, so they put all their banners and things like that. So that's why it didn't look full. But the stands that they were selling, like, it was packed. I was in the stands for the start of the race. It was packed. It was awesome. And I had a great time. It's a short track, so you do a lot of walking, but it doesn't feel like a lot because everything is way closer. So like IMS, when you try to get from one side of IMS to the other, it feels like it takes forever. It does, because that's a massive track. And then you go to something like this, and you know, you don't realize how much walking you do at the end of the day because it feels like everything is like super close. So it was quite nice. And so we started off the day, you know, getting into the gates. I picked up my little wristband for my garage pass and went to the autograph session. That was cool. I didn't actually go into Pato's line because most of my favorite drivers were in the other line, and I love Pato, but I'm not gonna go in a line just for Pato. So I decided to go into the other line, and I was like, well, it's Pato, so he'll probably be around, and I'll probably be able to find him later, which thankfully I actually was. So it was good. I went to the line. I had Joseph, Connor, Kyle, Felix, Callum, like all these awesome people, Rossi, and it was a really good line. David did that. Went to go find James Rowe to say hi, which I ended up getting a picture with him. That was cool, and great to see James before the race for the INDYNXT race. Watched the INDYNXT race. Got to watch the victory podium because if you have a garage pass, you can see the victory lane celebrations and stuff. So that was pretty cool. And then walked around for a couple hours, relaxed, ate lunch, took pictures for driver intros. That was cool. And then watched the race. I watched the race from the stands for like the first 80 laps. And then I watched the rest of it from the garage so I could go watch the victory celebration. So yeah. It was a good day. It was awesome. And we'll talk about what happened in the race shortly. So let's start off with INDYNXT because I love to give INDYNXT their flowers. I love it when INDYNXT races on an oval. Okay. I like it when INDYCAR races on the oval, but INDYNXT specifically, their racing product is so good on ovals. This is pretty much where you can see the talent develop before your eyes. Because there are some guys that are just not that great on road and street courses, but they will cook on ovals. And that was kind of what was happening. Yeah, it was a great, interesting race. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But to start off, let's talk about some of the news that happened earlier in the week with INDYNXT. So, James Rowe unfortunately had a communication error in Detroit. I was sad because he ended up finishing 13th last week in Detroit. Well, that was made even worse because due to a communication error, he was supposed to go to the back of the grid because he was a lapped car. He did not, because he didn't receive that message, whether that was just like the radio wasn't working, because a lot of drivers were complaining that their radios were cutting in and out from their spotters all weekend because tall buildings, bad reception, blah blah blah, you know, things that make sense. But you didn't get that message from race control, so race control handed him a 3-race probation and said, you're not allowed to qualify this weekend, and you need to start from the back of the grid for St. Louis. So I was really sad because I knew I was coming to this race, and I was like, of course, the race I go to, James has to start last. So very, very sad about that. I know he was disappointed about that as well, but there's not really much that, you know, you can do and argue about that. You know, if they tell you you've got a penalty, you've got a penalty. You're not really allowed to appeal penalties in INDYNXT like you are in INDYCAR. So yeah, just kind of sucked. But going into the weekend, so I knew he wasn't going to qualify. Qualifying went it was a pretty interesting weekend for qualifying, let's say that. So Dennis Hauger gets the pole on an oval. I didn't know he could cook like that on ovals. At least for 2-lap speed, he was ahead of everybody. Like, he was, I think, like 0.8 something miles per hour faster than the next person, which is a lot. Next was Lucky. Yeah, it was Lucky. No, it was Kaio. I'm pretty sure it was Kaio. It was Lucky or Kaio. It was one or the other. I think it was Kaio Colette. Sorry, I'm like trying to think of what happened. It was Kaio Colette. And, you know, it was an interesting top 10. You had Haley Deegan in the top 10. Haley Deegan has raced at Worldwide Technology Raceway before, in Craftsman Truck Series, I believe. So she had a little bit of prior experience. You had Juan Manuel Correa qualifying in the top 10 in an oval, which is his first oval. So that was pretty cool. So yeah, good stuff from them. Race day comes, you know, I'm like, okay, what chaos is gonna happen? Because I was expecting it. Last year, there was quite a bit of chaos in the INDYNXT race. It was some wild stuff. This year, 100% green flag running for INDYNXT. I was shocked. I was like jaw dropped. But at the same time, I was so excited because it allowed you to see how good these guys are when they could just race straight through with no yellows. It was awesome. And so at the beginning of the race, it's Dennis and Kaio Colette. And Kyle takes the lead. And he's like running away with it for a majority of the race, to be honest. He's, you know, pulling up a gap. I don't think we had we didn't have a single caution. James made up 4 places in the start. He started 19th. He was up to 15th. He ended up dropping back to 18th at the end. That was kind of sad. I was sad about that because I feel like he had a fast car. Dennis was struggling on the ovals, which I talked about it last week. I said, do you need to win on ovals to be a good race car driver in INDYNXT and INDYCAR? I said no. You know, and I think this proves it because I'm pretty sure he still finished top 5. I think he finished 5th. You know, it's like the Alex Pilot thing. It's like if you're consistent on ovals, you don't need to be amazing. I think he'll eventually win on an oval this season. I think he'll learn the craft. But like I said, qualifying on an oval, testing on an oval is different than racing on an oval. And you want to know who's good at racing on an oval? Lockie Hughes. Okay, here's why. Lockie Hughes had a disaster of a weekend last week. I mean, he still finished in the top 10, but you know, his wing came off in contact with his teammate and things like that, and it just wasn't a good weekend. It wasn't the weekend that he wanted when he's fighting his teammate Dennis Hauger for a championship. He comes back and he answers, okay? Because this man is in 5th and somehow ends up in 1st within the last like 10 laps and ends up winning this race. And I don't know where he came from. I had a friend that asked him, like, where did you come from to win this race? And he was like, honestly, I don't even know. We were just flying. He saved his tires. That's what he said. He said, I was saving. And he was like, I had enough to get me where I needed to go. So that right there, you know, I mean, he was a USF Pro 2000 champion, I'm pretty sure. And, you know, they race on one oval, which is IRP, or Lucas Oil Raceway, here in Indianapolis. That's one oval. But he might have had enough experience throughout his time to understand that when you're on an oval, you don't want to be in the lead, right? Because you burn more gas when you're in the lead. And, I mean, you don't necessarily cook your tires. You're more likely to cook your tires if you're stuck behind somebody because of the dirty air. But he just knew how to save. He saved his gas, he saved his tires. And then right when it was time to, like, get it done, he was able to do that. And that is a very impressive feat. Like, I seriously did not know when he got in the lead. I didn't know. I was there, and I did not know when he got in the lead, because that is just, the moves that he was making were amazing. He was flying. Salvador de Alba, he was up there trying to fight for podium place. Miles Rowe ends up getting second. Kyle Collette gets third. He took the lead pretty early and then fell back. I think at some point he was at like 4th or 5th, and then worked his way back up to 3rd. Yeah, Dennis Hauger, again, finished 5th. Still very consistent. He still leads the INDYNXT championship. I'm pretty sure he's got a healthy gap against Lockie Hughes, but I think if he, you know, struggles on ovals to the point where maybe he makes a mistake and crashes out or something like that, Lockie can be like right back in it. I don't think the title's over. Now, it depends on if he wins Road America this week or if Lockie does. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, it was great racing. And again, completely green flags. Like, it was awesome. And it was just an exciting, good race. Like, congrats to Able Motorsports. They got their 3rd podium of the season with Miles Rowe. Kaio, I don't remember how many Kaio got. I'm pretty sure he's been on almost every single podium this year, except 1 or 2. And then obviously Lockie winning. That's the 2nd win of the season. And he didn't even need to be on pole to win. That was good. Good racing. Now let's get into IndyCar. IndyCar was kind of like very crazy, but in a good way, in the best way, right? This is what we need. Night racing in IndyCar is the best thing that there is. Night racing on an oval, specifically. Now, I'm team, I want more ovals, but I'm not team, I want only ovals. I know there's some people that are fans of this series that want there to only be ovals for IndyCar. I am not in that camp. I think it's quite nice to have variety. I feel like if I only saw ovals all the time, I'd get a little bit bored. Not because the racing would be boring, it's just seeing the same style of racing over and over again. You know, because sometimes I get burned out on NASCAR. Because NASCAR, you know, doesn't have as many, you know, road courses and street courses. Like, they have some, which is good, because that, you know, adds some variety, but most of their races are on ovals. So, you know, I want more ovals, but I don't want only ovals. I think the street courses and the road courses add a lot of history, they add a lot of elements to it, they make the championship more interesting, because you have some guys that are really good on ovals and some guys that are really good on road and street courses. Alex Below. So, you know, it's just, it adds a spice to it that I like. But night racing on this oval specifically is amazing. We should have never stopped. And being there in person to see all of that, it was freaking awesome, because it was the race that you didn't know who was going to win, and I love those races. So let's talk about qualifying. So qualifying happened. We had Will Power getting the pole, his, I think, 71st pole in IndyCar. Extends his record of the all-time pole or P1 awards. So congrats to Will. We had Scott McLaughlin 2nd, Pato Award 3rd, Joseph, no, I think it was either Joseph on this was 4th or David Malukas, one or the other. I don't remember. And then you had, I think, Marcus Armstrong in the top 10. Felix Rosenquist in the top 10. Is that right? But a lot of, and it was kind of like, okay, you've got all these really strong short oval racers in the front rows. What's going to happen? Is there going to be anything chaotic? There was a lot that was happening. So going into race day, like, you know, the vibes were there. We knew it was going to be a fun race. Like I said, the stands packed up right before the race started. It was awesome. Everybody was buzzing, excited. The energy was just there. When the race starts, right, everything is running clean. You have Scott McLaughlin, Will Power, and David Malukas fighting. David takes the lead pretty quickly. And honestly, I thought David Malukas was going to run away with this race with how things were going. He looked really good. And obviously we know Lil Dave is really good in short ovals in general, specifically at this track. But obviously you put him in a Foyt that has Penske aligned, so it's basically a Penske. He's going to do really good. And, you know, he was kind of wiping the floor. He pulled out a pretty decent gap for the rest of the field, and I think he would have kept that gap had DiFrancesco not had his issues at the beginning of the race and brought out caution. So that was the first caution. There were too many cautions. We obviously had Joseph Newgarden's crash, so in the second, or like middle ground of the race, right? You had Joseph Newgarden being Joseph Newgarden at St. Louis, right? This man has won the race, I'm pretty sure, like 4 or 5 times before. So he was flying out there. Ends up in the lead, ends up in P1 for a while. At that point, I thought Joseph was going to walk away with it. And then an incident happens, this time involving Louis Foster. We talked about it last week about how Louis Foster ended up crashing in Detroit. He crashed into Rosenquist, and that wasn't his fault. This also wasn't his fault. I think he had another suspension failure or something. Hit the wall. People said they didn't throw the caution fast enough. I don't know. I haven't rewatched the whole race yet. I've only seen what I saw in person. So they probably didn't throw the caution fast enough, but he ends up going in the direction of Joseph Newgarden, and Joe kind of has to pick one way or another to go, and he just picks the wrong side, and, you know, gets taken out by Louis Foster, which it isn't his fault. I don't want people to go and, like, hate Louis Foster. This is not his fault. It's just an incident. It's a racing incident. Things happen. It really sucks. It was a scary incident because Joseph gets hit and his car flips and almost goes over the pit lane. And at this point, I was in the garage area. So I knew Joseph was leading. I was super excited about that. I'm waiting by the victory lane area because when you want to go watch like the victory podium and stuff, sometimes you have to get there early to get a good view. And I wanted to get a good view, so I decided that I was gonna go. I was standing by the fence. I looked down at my phone, and all I hear is just the crowd gasping, just and then silence. And when you hear silence at a racetrack, it is one of the most scariest things that you could think of. You know, I look up and I see a car upside down skidding down pit lane. And in my mind, I'm like, who the fuck is that? Who is that? It was Joseph. I found out it was Joseph. And it was terrifying. And I'm glad that him and Louis Foster are okay, because that was just scary for both of them. And I feel bad for Louis because now he's in another incident that wasn't his fault. So at this point, I'm just glad they're okay. Really sucked because Joseph was looking really fast, and I'm pretty sure he would have won that race had he not had that issue. Second half of the race, right? I thought they were gonna red flag it. They didn't. They just kept it yellow for a long time. When they go green flag running again, Connor Daly takes the lead. Now I love Connor Daly. Okay, I've met this man several times in my life. He has always been nice. He is so cool to talk to. He's hilarious. Like, if you want to meet a driver that has a personality, it's not that serious at all, it's Connor Daly. You know, and I was like, did this man pee in his race car again? He said he peed in his race car at the 500, he led laps. I was like, did he pee in his race car again? Because he was leading. I was like, whoa. He had an awesome battle with Pato. Clean racing. This is what I love to see. And Connor was having an astonishing race, because I'm pretty sure he ended up starting further back and made like 7 places up at the start, which is fantastic for him and for that team at JHR. And he was just flying. Like, I honestly feel like if things had gone better for Connor, he also could have won this race. Like I said, it was just a race that you didn't know who was going to win. Connor was battling Pato for the lead. They were having some clean racing. He kind of took off for a little bit. Like, Pato was kind of lingering, but couldn't get close enough to make the move. Final pit stops happen. Scott Dixon's himself to the lead before he has to pit. So he puts the whole field pits. Scott Dixon puts himself a lap down, or puts everybody a lap down, and then pits, and then basically comes out in the lead. And this is where things get good, because you're like, you really don't know who's gonna win. And because you had Scott, you had Kyle, you had Pato, you had Connor, you had all these guys up there, and it was just like nerve-wracking in the best way, because you're just like, what's gonna happen next? Who's gonna take the lead at the end? And we had a lot of different interesting strategies in this race, because, you know, you had guys like Felix and Callum that up until the last few laps were in the lead of this race, and you didn't know if they were gonna make the risk to stay out. Now, Callum pit like 2 laps before the end of the race, and if I was Callum, not to say that, you know, these teams don't know what they're doing. Obviously, they had a strategy, and they wanted to make sure that Callum could make it to the end, so they pit him. But I feel like, me personally, I would have been like, let's just risk it for the biscuit. We got 2 laps. It's a short oval. You know, you either win, you end up on the podium, or you end up somewhere in the top 10. You know? But that's just a personal me. I probably would have stayed out with 2 laps to go and just risked it. But I understand why they didn't. They probably just wanted a strong finish and didn't want him to be in the way of the leaders, like the leaders. Kyle Kirkwood ends up taking the lead and wins this race. He had some close battles with Pato. Pato said that he got held up by Nolan because it was like Kirkwood and Dixon were fighting, and Pato was trying to get in that mix, and Nolan was kind of there. He was a lap car. He was kind of in the way, and I'm sure that they had a conversation about that, you know, later in the night or whatever, in the team meeting, of like, hey, we can't have that, right? But Pato gets second, podium, awesome. Christian Rasmussen, let's give a shout out to Diva himself. Christian Rasmussen gets on the podium, and for those of you who don't know Christian Rasmussen, or if you've only watched the races and seen him crash and things like that and make mistakes, first of all, guy's still learning. You're gonna have good drivers, you're gonna have bad drivers, you're gonna have drivers that are learning. He didn't get a full season last year, so this is his first full season. If you know Christian Rasmussen, he is a INDYNXT champion for 2023, I think. Yeah. He, in that series, in INDYNXT, wiped the floor, wiped the field on ovals. He is a amazing oval racer. And to everybody that's ever talked to me about Christian Rasmussen, I always say Christian Rasmussen knows how to race on ovals. He has finished pretty high on in the Indy 500 both years that he's participated in it. He's really, really fast. I think we saw that a little bit in Milwaukee last year when he got to run that, but I think people are starting to take notice. He and that Java House ECR team made amazing moves and strategies to put them in that position to get that podium and secure it. So congrats to them, and congrats to Christian. He was also hilarious posting all those photos with his trophy. That was funny. And, you know, I think we will see more ECR podiums. Hopefully Rossi can get on the podium this season. That'd be super cool. But I definitely think that we can see Rasmussen up there at short ovals like Milwaukee. That's coming up soon. So that'll be really, really awesome. And don't count him out on Iowa either. That's also going to be really awesome. So, yeah, congrats to Christian Rasmussen. Another congratulations to Robert Schwartzman and the Prema team. Whatever personal feelings you have for Robert Schwartzman, okay, it is what it is. But you have to acknowledge when drivers do really well. He did really well. Another driver that did well, Santino Ferrucci finished 5th. You know, Santino's not my favorite person, but you know what? Good job on that Foyt team finishing up high. David Malukas finished 12th, I believe. Still a solid result after everything, because he, I think, almost crashed at some point in the race, brushed the wall a little bit, spun out. But yeah, Robert Schwartzman finished 10th. Prema's first top 10 in the series, so good for them. Congrats to that crew, because they are an outsider coming in, and I don't think they have any alliances with anybody in the Chevy side, so they're really like learning how all of this is done and are doing a good job with it. You know, they got the pole at Indianapolis, they get a top 10 here, they're learning, and I like that. And who else do we have to shout out? Let me actually look at the finishing lineup. Dixon finished 4th because he's Scott Dixon, so he's always going to be up there. Connor finished 6th. All right, good result for the JHR team. Renus VK, yes, that's what I want to talk about. Renus VK at DCR, somehow finding a way to finish in the top 10 again. Finished 7th, that's awesome. Alex Below finished 8th because he's Alex Below and he's still consistent. If this is his worst finish, well, actually it won't be his worst finish because he DNF'd at Detroit, but if this is his worst top 10 finish of the year, that's still an 8th. That's great. Marcus Armstrong finished 9th. Robert Schwartzman finished 10th. I think they said there were 9 teams in the top 10. The most teams that I think they've ever had in the top 10. That is awesome. I love to see that. Rossi finished 11th. Malukas 12th. Erickson 13th. Lundgaard 14th. Kiffin Simpson 15th. Felix 16th. Colton 17th. Callum 18th. Nolan 19th. Stingray 20th. Jacob 21st. Graham 22nd. Devlin, Scott, Joseph, Louis, and Will. For those that are giving Nolan Siegel shit, let's talk about that real quick. Okay, the papaya bias is coming out. For those of you guys that are giving Nolan Siegel shit, he is at McLaren as a development driver. When you compare his performance to his teammates in Christian Lundgaard and Pato O'Ward, those are guys that have had several seasons in IndyCar. All right, obviously they're both race winners. It took Christian a lot longer to win. Nobody was saying things when he was in, Ray Hall, and the Ray Halls were mostly not great except for a few tracks because they were giving him time to develop and be a good driver. And that's what McLaren Indy is doing with Siegel. He's not there to win races, he's there to learn and hopefully improve. McLaren announced that they're keeping all their drivers for next year. That's great. Next year, then we can have these conversations on should Nolan Siegel stay at McLaren long term. We can have those conversations next year because this is his first full season in the McLaren car. He's going to have the opportunity to learn, to gain knowledge from his teammates as well, and to be mentored. Obviously, Tony Kanon's his mentor, and I think Tony's a little bit too emotional. And I love TK, but I can admit that he's a little bit too emotional when things don't go Nolan's way. And that rubs people the wrong way, and that's completely fair. But I think that, people being so quick to criticize Nolan is not cool. Just give the guy some time to learn, some time to get better, and to work with his team. His whole team this year is completely new. They've moved a lot of people around that used to be on Pato's team and the 7-car team, and they've moved them to the 6 crew. So it's a whole new crew. They're just learning how to be consistent, how to get some synergy. Give him time. And then next year, if it's the same thing and he's not really improving, then we can talk about does he deserve to be at McLaren or not. And I think people being like he's a paid driver, there's plenty of paid drivers on the grid. Let's be honest, it's racing. In most motorsports, there are paid drivers. If you have the opportunity, if you get a phone call from somebody that says, we want you to drive for our team, are you going to say no? No, you're not going to say no. So I think that's a stupid argument. There's a lot of paid drivers on the grid. Kyle Kirkwood wins. Still all Hondas. 100% Hondas this season. All right, Kirk's won 3 of the last 6 races. He's just behind Pato in the standings after his penalty in Indianapolis. Took a lot of points or else he'd be a lot closer to Below. So he's in 3rd. Pato's in 2nd. Only 73 points, I think, away from Below, which people are probably like, oh, the championship's still over. It's not. It's not over till it's over. You never know. If Below has, 2 really bad races where he DNFs and the other 2 are really strong, they can make up some ground. So you just don't know till Nashville. Congrats to Kyle and the Andretti team. I know a couple of the people that work at Andretti, and it's always really exciting to see when you win, because it's a very emotional thing. A lot of the teams or the crew members, they're the guys that are behind the cameras most of the time, doing all the work behind the scenes to make a car good enough to win. And this is the moment where they get their flowers and they get their time to shine. So congrats to Kyle Kirkwood and Andretti. I was hoping Pato could get it done. He didn't. He finished 2nd though. Still a great result. Still got to see a Pato podium. I'm so happy. I got to take a picture with him too. So I'm super happy for them at McLaren. It's a really good season for us so far. So I hope we can keep the momentum up into Road America next week and further on into the season. Things are heating up. I think, you know, Kyle Kirkwood winning on an oval is really good for him. If he can continue to win on ovals, it's going to make things a lot closer, I think, by Nashville. And, you know, I think people were underestimating Kyle Kirkwood coming into this season. I think they're learning that Kyle's here to play, and he's here to win. So I think it's going to be awesome. So if you guys like this ranting, you know, chatting about race stuff, and you want to see more videos like this, then make sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below who you want to win at Road America this week and your thoughts on the St. Louis race. I'd love to hear them. And I'll catch you guys next week for Road America. Peace.